The Jim Corbett National Park, established in 1936 in India, is the first national park of the Asian continent. Most of the tourists to the national park visit the place to catch a glimpse of wildlife and be closer to nature. 147 people out of a survey of close to 200 picked the choice of watching wildlife as their primary objective. With an area of more than 1,300 square kilometers, including 500 square kilometers of core forest area, the Jim Corbett National Park is a fascinating and breathtaking world in itself, with a rich variety of flora and fauna.
In comparison to Indian forest or the two different countries which I have visited, the South African forest, that is the Kruger and St. Petersburg, and the Yala, Corbett has much more varied kind of wildlife. I think other than zebra, giraffe and the lions, Corbett has most of the other mammals which are found in South African forest. And the bird life, I think there are about 560 different variety of birds in Corbett. Not only that, the landscape and the greenery with the different kind of plants and trees which are found here, more varied. I don't know whether you have been to Bijrani, Malani, Lohachor. If you go to that and come in Dhikala, within 4-5 kilometers you can see the changes in flora and fauna. That's the beauty of Jim Corbett, and the temperature variations, which is generally not available not only in South African forest, in the other Indian rainforest.
It's really so exciting every time I come here, because I've come here for the third time now, and that allure of being able to see a tiger, because that's still there and it's very much there. This is something different from your kind of a guaranteed sighting that you would probably have in Ranthambore or probably Bandhavgarh. In places such as these, you would generally know that you would definitely sight a tiger. Here, the excitement of trying to spot a tiger in the wild is so different, because you really chase the trails and tracks, and you move throughout the day probably trying to find a tiger, and you don't. Probably if you're here for about 3 to 4 days, you might never even see a tiger at all. But then when you do, you feel that special excitement of having seen a tiger in the wild, and that is great, that is wonderful. But even without the tiger, you see whether it's the elephants or deer or any other wildlife. But more than that, it's the forests, in the core area particularly, it's the forest, the environment around here, the atmosphere around here that makes you feel so great. And of course, I cannot forget to mention that this place has the name of Jim Corbett associated. So I think all of us who've been reading about his books from our childhood, or probably have a feel of the kind of place he had been talking about. There's a special charm attached to that name itself. So that makes us feel good every time we come here. So yeah, it's a wonderful experience coming here.
It is indeed a wonderful experience, and that is one of the reasons why over 200,000 people visited the park last year. The park has a total of 12 forest rest houses, out of which Dhikala is the largest and most famous guest house. But someone said that everything comes at a price, and it does indeed here. It is very difficult for a general tourist to get a booking to stay overnight at a guest house inside the forest.
किसी को नहीं मिलती, जो टूरिस्ट आता है उसे कोई बुकिंग नहीं मिलती यहाँ पर।
ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है?
ऐसा इसलिए हो रहा है कि यहाँ के जितने भी ट्रैवल एजेंट हैं उनकी सेटिंग अच्छी है अंदर, उन्हें बुकिंग मिल जाती है जी। और जहाँ पर आम टूरिस्ट होता है क्यों में खड़ा रहता है उसे कोई बुकिंग नहीं मिलती है।
But this is just one of the many problems here. People feel that the government has failed to live up to expectations and needs to do much more to ensure that the place is properly conserved. It is one of the reasons that tourism was banned in all the national parks across India last year and was only reallowed after new guidelines were put into place.
There's a lack of vision on the part of the people who make the policies, and you see, you can go to Taj Mahal, 1 lakh people can go to Taj Mahal in a day and Taj Mahal would still be standing. But if 5,000 people enter into Corbett Tiger Reserve, everything will collapse, animals will get disturbed, all kinds of disturbances will take place. Now, in the form of tourism, if there is development happening, I do not know about the development, and I do not endorse the development which is happening in Corbett outside the park and all that. But why did the government not come out with a yardstick when the Project Tiger was launched? When the Project Tiger, there were amendments in Wildlife Protection Act. Wildlife Protection Act was written way back in 1972. So many amendments have taken place till about the last amendment was 2006 when this Section 38V was, the core critical tiger habitat was introduced into that. That is the reason why I do not agree with the forest department, though I've been the part of the forest. I do not agree with the policy makers that why did you not consider tourism as an important tool to save the tiger? If you had considered that, then you would have made some ecotourism guidelines 20 years back. If not in 1973, 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s, sometime. Why now? After all the land use practices have actually, all land use has been converted into commercial and buildings have taken place and all that. So you want to control all that by controlling tourism inside.
Interest in wildlife that is increasing is probably a positive thing because only when we keep visiting such places we know about the wonderful atmosphere here, the animals, and then we probably feel the greater need for conserving it. But then there has to be a particular limit to the number of tourists that are coming, probably the frequency in which they're coming. There has to be some safeguards. So because in tourism there's something called carrying capacity, which means we should not allow a particular level of, we should allow probably only a particular level of tourists coming in, only that much which will allow the sustainable tourism to happen. Only beyond that it probably becomes a little unsustainable. So rules, regulations, or probably some kind of framework has to be built in, which by the government, the policy makers and everybody around, so that we only allow that level of tourism to happen which will make it something that is sustainable over the long period of time.
No one is bothered about the animal or the nature or even the forest. You can see the amount of people who are staying at the fringes of the forest, entering for their daily lives. They come, they take the woods. Not only that, they even poach the wild boar, deer for their daily meat. And the fish, the mahasir and the gooch, these two are one of the endangered species. Even if you go out in the market, you can find those fish. Yes, it is at a cost and it is not available freely, but if you pay, you will get it. So how these things are happening? And not only that, I have, in fact, I came to know from 15th June to 15th October the park is generally closed. But between that time also, relatives of people who are authorities out here can enter. And even when Supreme Court has put a ban till October 15th last year, people were visiting the park, and that means the rules, regulation and law has to be much more stringent, and monitoring has to be much more better. People have to be accountable and responsible who are holding those posts.
Because before the economical growth of the country also, somewhere they have to sacrifice certain areas, just not for only 9% growth or whatever. I think that's something which they have to give a priority to this sector, because at the moment the wildlife and environment issues are not given that much priority even in the budget as compared to other things.
In addition to these problems, the biggest problem is the excess amount of money one has to pay to be able to visit the park. The general tourist has no other option other than to pay private tourist agents to get permission for staying inside the forest. And generally, the amount is much more than what has been officially said by the authorities.
We are a family of 5. My wife, my 2 kids and my mother. I pay about 30,000 per night. And this rate has been going on in Corbett since I am coming in. That is 1.5 years. It has not changed, which is inclusive everything. But if you go to the website and see the cost, it is 1250. You are absolutely, so 2 rooms 5,000. Yeah, sorry, 2,500 and food 5,000, with safari another 7,000. 2 safaris, 3.5. So 5 plus 7, it's 12,000, and miscellaneous another say 1,000, 13,000. It should be about 13,000 per night for 5 of us. We are paying 17,000 extra. Where is that 17,000 going? Okay, if a middleman is working, he might see at an average in any industry, the service charge or the profit is between 5% to 15% depending on the volume. But this is atrocious. It is more than 100%. It's about 125% profit. And where does this money go is a question mark.
But a tourist's misery just does not end here. After he has tried everything and paid extra money to an agent for a booking, he still has to pay more for food and water. With a view to helping tourists, the Indian government took over the canteens at the rest houses last year and started operating them. But without any proper checks in place, the people running the canteens are filling their pockets.
और वो भी है, और ना गेस्ट को पूरी फैसिलिटी मिल रही है वहाँ पे, और ना खाने में कोई क्वालिटी है वहाँ की। सब ऐसे ही खाना और रेट इतने हाई फाई कर रखे हैं उनने। मतलब ये गलत कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि गेस्ट को बहुत तकलीफ़ हो रही है सर वहाँ पे। ना खाना अच्छा है ना कुछ, वही एक मजबूरी का फ़ायदा है करके गेस्ट जंगल से जाएगा कहाँ, और कोई दूसरी शॉप है नहीं जो है उनका, मतलब अपना रात कर रहे हैं।
It should be a reasonable thing, but only making sure that that tourists feel that they're not getting a bad deal, and they feel good about coming here. So that is the only thing that we need to keep in mind, because as long as people are coming here enjoying the beauty of this place, the chances are that we'll still be able to do something for the conservation of tigers and for this environment, because that plays a great role.
The Jim Corbett National Park plays a major role in the economy, with close to £800,000 of revenue generated just last year. The government, however, needs to pay heed to the plight of the animals and ensure that they can live peacefully in their natural environment. The government must come up with stringent laws and look at the wider benefits of wildlife other than just treating it as a mere commodity, to ensure that this precious gift does not ride into the sunset.